Hello out there, welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and together we're going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year. Today we're going to be reading Genesis 47:11 through 27. So we're closing in on the end of Genesis here. And Joseph settled his father and his brothers, and gave them a holding in the land of Egypt, and the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph sustained his father and his brothers, and all his father's household with bread, down to the mouths of the little ones. And there was no bread in all the earth, for the famine was very grave. And the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph collected all the silver to be found in the land of Egypt and in all the land of Canaan in return for the provisions they were buying. And Joseph brought the silver to the house of Pharaoh. When the silver of the land of Egypt and of the land of Canaan ran out, and all of Egypt came to Joseph, saying, "Let us have bread, for why should we die before your eyes? For the silver is gone." And Joseph said, "Let me have your livestock, that I may give you in return for your livestock if the silver is gone." And they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them bread in return for the horses and the stocks of the sheep and the stocks of cattle and the donkeys, and he carried them forward with bread in return for all their livestock that year. And that year ran out, and they came to him the next year and said to him, "We shall not conceal from the Lord that the silver has run out, and the animal livestock are my Lord's. Nothing is left for our Lord but our carcasses and our farmland. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our farmland? Take possession of us and our farmland in return for bread, and we with our farmland will be slaves to Pharaoh, and give us seed, that we may live and not die, and that the farmland not turn to desert." And Joseph took possession of all the farmland of Egypt for Pharaoh, for each Egyptian sold his field, as the famine was harsh upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. And the people he moved town by town from one end of the border of Egypt to the other. Only the farmland of the priests he did not take in possession, for the priests had a fixed allotment from Pharaoh, and they ate from their allotment that Pharaoh had given them. Therefore they did not sell their farmland. And Joseph said to the people, "Look, I have taken possession of you this day with your farmland for Pharaoh. Here is seed for you, and sow the land. And when the harvest come, you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be yours for seeding the field, and for your food, for those in your household, and for your little ones to eat." And they said, "You have kept us alive. May we find Pharaoh in the eyes of Lord, in being Pharaoh's slave." And Joseph made it a fixed law to this very day over the farmland of Egypt, that Pharaoh should have a fifth. Only farmland of the priests, it alone, did not become Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they took holdings in it, and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. All right, so now we have the continuation of events and the beginning of the degrading status of the people. What's interesting, though, is that essentially you have everybody getting kind of wrapped up in this system, right? Because nobody really has any economic footing. And so essentially everybody ends up just kind of getting sucked into this system, it seems like. Which makes things interesting for later on when you talk about a mixed multitude leaving. It's hard to know exactly, in this process how much people got mixed in and things like that. And you know what I mean? Because at the very end, when you talk about a freedom from all of these obligations, and these obligations started with what seems to be almost the entire population, it just makes you wonder how many people left at that point. It would seem like a fair amount
Well,
by now.
they were in Egypt for more than 2 centuries, and so there would have been time later on for Egypt to expand and to gather people from different areas as
Yeah.
slaves.
Oh, yeah. No, no,
You
no.
know,
It gets even more complicated. I'm
it,
just saying, just from the beginning, though.
it is. I don't. I wonder why Joseph handled it the way he did,
Yeah.
but he did. He consolidated things. He basically, he was certainly a good servant for Pharaoh. As Pharaoh's position is much greater than ever
Yeah.
at the end of this, but he also keeps everybody alive. But why he wanted to organize the country this way, maybe that was the most efficient way of making sure that everybody stayed alive.
Yeah. Well, just mathematically, it's not the end of the world. It sounds really rough because you're all like you're trying to be slaves, but I mean, if you're an indentured servant, right,
Yeah,
and
right.
you get to keep
80%.
80% of your stuff,
Right.
I mean, a modern tax rate of 20%, people don't think of as
No,
particularly cruel.
no,
So I kind of understand where it started. Like, at this point, it doesn't seem that horrific, and everyone's like, how can slavery not be horrific? In the context of what this is talking about, it's not that clear. It doesn't say
right,
anything about difficult life. It makes it seem more like, it's like you don't really own your land. You basically work for Pharaoh in
right.
order to live here. It's almost like being in a coal town or something kind of scenario. It doesn't sound to me like chattel slavery in the way that people modernly think of it. You know what I mean? Doesn't it seem more like a coal town, like
It may be
in
also
America?
that over
You don't
time,
own anything; you just work for a corporation, kind of thing.
yeah, and it may be that over time they were able to purchase it back after the famine. Possibly, we don't know what happened afterwards if they
You would think that they would have been able to if it would have been
buy
an
it,
ethical
buy it,
system,
buy it
right?
back from Pharaoh. But
Because if the
yeah,
whole reason why they can't own anything is because they literally don't have anything
yeah,
to pay with,
yeah,
and you would think it's like, okay, this system would allow them to potentially get it back, right? Because once the famine is over, it's like, okay, you keep rolling along, and then you can kind of cut back on yourself, and you're giving Pharaoh 20%, but you could figure out a way to potentially get it back, I would think.
part of this may be that the Pharaoh of the time was considered by Joseph to be a virtuous ruler, and
Uh-huh.
maybe Joseph was trying to consolidate the nation so that he could uh, spread certain positive values in the nation
Yeah.
and take advantage of his position
Hmm.
under Pharaoh to perhaps improve morally the condition of the country.
Right.
I'd like to think of it as
Right.
possibly that as well.
Well, a lot of people will work with less than perfect systems just for the sake of the greater good, and it can be very challenging
Yeah,
because, like,
right,
what do
right,
you I don't really know. In his defense, I'm not sure exactly what you could do in a
right,
situation like this because you have people that don't really have any
right,
economic leverage of any sort.
right.
So,
Mhm.
to some degree, this seems like the most ethical outcome within the context of that cultural situation that you could maybe even come up with. I don't know.
Mhm.
And like you said, it doesn't necessarily imply that there wouldn't be a way out. Usually in the Bible, even when you talk about slavery, you're talking about a system where there would be a time commitment and there would be a way out of it and stuff like that. This doesn't particularly get into that. It just says, you know, um, a fixed law that the pharaoh should have a fifth. Well, if that was going to be a fixed law, then that would mean, like I said, it would be like a 20% tax rate indefinitely, which isn't really that awful. I mean, I don't think.
Yeah,
Like,
and
all things considered.
it also says
I mean, that
that
might just be me speaking way out of ignorance, but
no, it also there's a statement where he says where the author where it says um, that it's that way to this day.
yeah,
What scripture is that?
that's 26.
Uh,
So that is kind of interesting because
so
obviously that isn't really a factor to this
so
day. So what does that mean?
yeah. So was that Moses
Uh-huh.
speaking there that
Maybe.
in his day it was still that way, or
Interesting.
even a later
Yeah.
edit? But
Right.
so the system was in place for quite some time. It doesn't
Right.
mean that it was always in place.
Right.
So
It also goes to show that when you see the "in to this day," it's not the implication that the Bible is trying to say 2021. It could
oh
be
yeah,
to
right.
this day when that was
When
written,
that was
which
written,
makes a
yeah,
very big difference.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Well, I know some people don't look at it that way. They'll say, it'll be like to this very day, and they're like looking, it's like there's a rock there to this very day, and so they think maybe you can find it because if the Bible is true, it's to this very day. But the Bible was written at a time.
yeah, right,
So that doesn't make it false because
right,
to this very day could be whatever this was, you know,
okay.
1300 BC or whatever. I don't know, whatever this was written. Um, Anywho, anything else?
No, I think we're now going to come to the conclusion.
Yes, we are going to be coming to this conclusion. We are almost done with Genesis, so this is a perfect time to get people to like and subscribe and all of that. Did you have something else?
Yes, I do have something else.
Okay. Right when I was giving my good pitch.
They came into Egypt as a clan of, let's say, let's give the figure of 75,
Uh-huh.
including all of Joseph's
Yep.
clan.
Yep.
But they multiplied very rapidly,
Yeah.
and
And it was more than 75 because women were not included in that number.
oh, I see. That's a good point. Yeah, I should.
There had to be female
Right.
child
Yeah,
children.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the 75 are mentioned, but there's
Right.
yeah, right. Good point.
Yeah.
All right, but in any case, it's very much like the Quebecois. I forget how. I think there were like 60,000
Hmm.
when the British gave them the right to basically continue their culture, and they multiplied exceedingly. They had what they called up in Quebec the Revenge of the Carib,
Hmm.
where they just multiplied so
Yep.
much, and now that leveled off in the
Yep.
60s.
Right.
But anyway, uh, I want to go to verse 27. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there and grew and multiplied exceedingly.
Exceedingly.
So that did become ultimately a problem.
Yep.
They were doing so well
Yep.
that they became too significant, and therefore, because they were not Egyptian but living there in
Uh-huh.
such a large number and so prosperous, they
Yep.
became considered a threat.
Yep. Well, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
People often like, well, why are there so few people that are like me, and why is this world so have such such why is this world so corrupt? It's like, sure, but when you're small, generally the world is corrupt, but they're not particularly out to get you. And then you get bigger, and then the world actually is out to get you. So it's like you would love to find that balance where you're big enough to have an impact, but not big enough to be on the radar, and that's pretty much impossible. You're
Yeah.
going to be one or the other. So right now, I think, to be honest, biblical Christianity is a little bit under the radar because it's not as big. However, what this says about rapidly multiplying, I think it's going to happen because if you look at who's having children, it's more biblically minded people, at least in the United States. So over time, that's going to shift, and to some
Yeah.
degree, if you want to just think about it in a mathematical way, think of your local congregation or think of your local inner circle of friends. How many kids are they having? Imagine they had more, and imagine their kids had more. In a very short period of time within your lifetime, you could have an extreme amount of difference in terms of how many people might be in a mindset similar to your own. And if you think that's a good idea, what are you doing to try to enable that? How are you trying to figure out economically how to pull that off? Life choices, how to pull it off. Um, you know, Multiplication as a means in of itself to spread the Bible is true. It doesn't always have to be through converting other people. And then getting back to what we were talking about, the God of your fathers, there's something to be said about that. When you have children and you train them up right, well, those are children that are going to have the image of God that you have, the religion that you have, and so on and so forth.
That reminds me on a topic that is maybe distantly related. The liberal secular people used to like to portray Orthodox Jews as a bunch of old people. But if you go among Orthodox, there's children
Everywhere.
running all over the place,
Yeah.
and that they've been multiplying rapidly.
It's crazy. I mean, we went to Williamsburg in New
and,
York,
and Borough
and
Park,
and you
yeah,
just forget like what birth control has done because there's children everywhere. But
yeah,
people have disconnected sex from procreation in such a concrete way that's allowed them to just not have as many kids as they used to. And we would have a lot more kids if people didn't. And I'm not anti-birth control. I'm just saying that it is interesting when you get to people that are more the default, and they are, people that believe children are always a blessing and they basically do whatever they can to have as many kids as possible. It's almost too far the other way, it's like in terms of like keeping score or something. But on the other hand, look at the outcome, right? You go there and there's children everywhere, and it just changes culture like that.
yeah.
It is so different.
It's a
It is so different.
well, it will give them more power over time.
Well, if you
But
also think about groups that are a bit of a threat and get
mm,
persecuted, you can think of those people there as well. They get called upon as a group often because they are noticeable.
right,
They have a very defined culture. They're iconoclasts, and they're just there, and
right.
yeah. So yeah, it has the opposite effect. So you got to pick your battle. You got to choose your life.
But
If
that's one reason why we have so many Mormons in the world, because
yes,
they had large
same
families,
thing. Yeah.
and they
Hmm.
also now
Yeah.
are a group with clout,
Yeah.
partly because of the numbers.
Islam, same thing.
Islam, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but like I said, it's something to consider in your own sphere. You can only control so much, but maybe think about it. How many kids do you want? What would change that? What does that mean for the world around you? What about your friends? Are you helping them have more kids if they want them? You know, in your group, in your church, is there a network to where when they have kids they can feel like the community is going to contribute in ways, or whatever you need to do in order to make that happen? Just think about it. It's beneficial. Just saying. Let's get practical about things. Anyway, comments.
So on to number
that was
on
my that was my TED talk. So
on to number 7.
yes, on to number 7. That was number 7. Yeah, that was the last one for the week, sir.
We're finishing just with that they're multiplying exceedingly.
Yep, that's how the
Uh,
Jews want to end on it. Well, it's a very
and
Jewish thing to end
yeah,
on.
there you go. Well,
You know,
the next section is the end of
we
Jacob's
were just
life.
talking about how they're good at multiplying exceedingly. They are.
The next section deals with the end of Jacob's life, so
Yep.
it is a logical
Yeah.
new section.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
next week we will wrap up Genesis on our way to Exodus, which is going to be fun as we start to get more into the nitty gritty law stuff when we get to Exodus. There's little bit less narrative, a little at the beginning, and then it starts to drift into law land. And I know a lot of people are excited to hear our nitty gritty law discussions, which I think will get pretty interesting. So if you're interested, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, call up your friends. This is a good time for them to get involved because we're wrapping up Genesis. They can binge watch the whole book and be right in right in line with us for Exodus. So, and we'll see you tomorrow.